Let's face it, in life, yes, there are unique situations. And when it comes to retirement planning, many couples and many individuals have their very own unique situations to consider. And most aren't extremely rare or extremely unusual. They're just circumstances that don't apply to the majority of folks. And today, we're going to be talking about some of these unique retirement situations and about how investing for income can be a sound strategy in most of those situations. So we're going to be covering things like identifying some examples of these unique situations. In particular, two things: unmarried couples living together, and also retirement planning when a special needs child is involved. And we're also going to be talking about why the income model works so well, almost regardless of your situation. And of course, helping me out as usual is income specialist and best-selling author Jeff Small. But we're also going to be hearing from additional income specialists, Dave Stearns, Jerry Slusiewicz, and Michael Eastham. And as always, we're going to be answering some of your questions. But right now, let's clarify just what we mean by unique situations and share some examples. Today, the typical TV families that we grew up with as baby boomers or Generation Xers are in many ways a thing of the past. Yes, there are still many families that fit the image: a married man, a married woman, children from their own marriage together, and oftentimes all living in the same house. In the modern world, though, it's likely that both parents work and are putting money into separate 401k accounts for retirement. Now, once retirement nears, they'll have to align their goals and merge their savings into a single financial strategy. And not literally, but at least when it comes to planning. And hopefully, they'll also create a will and estate plan that spells out how those remaining assets will be distributed to their loved ones when they're gone. And all that can be defined as a fairly typical situation with no real distinct factors to account for. Of course, when it comes to families, there really is no such thing as typical, right? And everyone's situation has its own special challenges. Now, in today's world, even the scenario I just described isn't as conventional as it used to be. Because for many years now, the divorce rate in the United States has been around 50%. In other words, divorce no longer qualifies as a unique situation when it comes to financial planning. But it can create some unique challenges around things like Social Security, taxes, as well as other key retirement issues. And that's even more true when second marriages are involved, along with raising children from multiple marriages. But beyond divorce, what are some more genuinely unique situations that affect retirement planning? Well, maybe you own or are selling a business, or you want to start a business right after retirement. Maybe you've come into sudden wealth. Maybe your spouse or partner has just died before retirement. Maybe you and your partner have been together for 30 years or longer, but you never actually tied the knot. And that last item is one of the more common unique situations in retirement planning today, if you'll pardon the oxymoron. We'll talk more about that situation specifically in just a bit. Now, before I bring Jeff in, let me take a moment to answer one of your questions. Linda K. from Michigan asks, can you talk a bit about preferred stock and how it's used investing for income? Sure, Linda. Well, preferred stock is kind of interesting because it has a fixed dividend, so you know exactly what the income is going to be, assuming there's no bankruptcy on the preferred stock. So even though it's considered a class of stock, it's different from regular stock as most people think, and perhaps as you think. It's more of a bond-like instrument. So preferred stocks are one of the tools that income specialists often use. So Linda, thank you so much for your submission. And be sure to submit your own questions to Ask Dave at theretirementIncomestore.com. And now, of course, let's bring in Jeff Small. So Jeff, last weekend was a unique weekend because we're so busy preparing for these unique situations that neither of us went fishing. That was the first time probably in a couple of months that happened, is it not?
Dave, I want to focus all my downtime on the show. That's the most important thing besides fishing.
I love it. Perfect.
So listen, we're confronted with unique situations every day with our customers on a whole host of different issues, but two of the most common ones we see are the divorce issues, and now we're thrust as the financial advisor into the middle of helping out both spouses who are diametrically opposed. And the other one we see a lot of is maybe in second marriages now, where we've got to deal with estate planning issues and making sure people's financial fundamentals are taken care of.
Yeah, and it's important, obviously in the case of divorce, also to look at tax implications when it is divorce settlement that occurs. And also important to look at Social Security. Just because you're divorced doesn't mean that you can't benefit from your spouse's Social Security if that benefit's higher than yours. But when you get remarried, as you know, the biggest thing is really estate planning. The biggest concern is, okay, one spouse passes away, leaves everything to the other, as these traditional, we call them I love you wills, right? But then the second spouse passes and everything goes to his or her children. And the first spouse's children accidentally get disinherited. And if you think about it, that's one of the reasons why people sometimes don't get married later in life. If they're divorced, maybe they just say, we can live together and act as a married couple, but not necessarily tie the knot legally. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more and more of that type of situation these days, it seems.
That happens a lot with folks on second marriages and maybe third marriages. And, a lot of people like to get married again in retirement. It's very common. But you've got to make sure you partition your assets correctly. That's the most important thing, because generally, in a second or third marriage, the husband's assets are going to go to his family. The wife's assets are going to go to their family. And so you've got to make sure you got the legal grounds for that, or you end up with a giant mess.
Yeah. And that's true, and that can be done, if you're married or if you stay single and live together. But the reality of the matter is that the biggest risk is, what if one person goes into a convalescent facility, right? If you're married, all your assets together will deem to be attributable to that one person, and the state could end up with almost everything. But if you don't get married in the first place, then at least that the healthy person's assets are protected. So I find that that's often a major reason why people don't bother getting married on the second go around.
Well, there's no doubt it's an incentive, Dave. It's definitely an incentive to not get married when you're worried about the effect of long-term healthcare expenses and what the person you care about is going to be left with.
Yeah. Of course, that goes the other way, right? The disadvantages are, okay, when I die, I want Teresa to get my Social Security benefits because they're going to be higher. If we're not married, then she won't get those. We have to be married to get those. Also, when I die, only a spouse can really take that IRA benefit tax-free, right? I want to have her get that. And of course, as you know, she can't get that tax-free if we're not married. So sometimes you find people not getting married for certain reasons, and then if one spouse becomes terminally ill, they'll then get married to really protect those kinds of tax issues. And it's so funny, Jeff, it sounds so weird. Sometimes people come in, they talk about it. It sounds so unromantic when they're talking about getting married as a tax haven, a tax issue, whether it's good or bad. But, people are becoming more knowledgeable and, as you know, and more informed. And as a result, they're trying to make good financial decisions, not just decisions from the heart. I guess when you're younger, you make decisions all from the heart. And when you get older, maybe not so much. So Jeff, I know you're excited because right after the break, we're going to welcome, not right after the break, but we're going to welcome our first guest, David Stearns, who's an expert at these things in his own right. And as you know, Jeff, we're also going to be talking about the unique challenges of retirement planning for what we call domestic partners, those who live together but choose not to tie the knot. I'm David Scranton. I'm with Jeff Small. We're the Income Generation, and we'll be right back. I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
If you're age 55 or older, our free Retirement Income Kit is for you. Learn the fundamentals of investing for income. Discover potential hidden risks to your retirement plan. Visit yourincomekit.com to download your free Retirement Income Kit.
Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. It's great to have you here as we're looking at unique retirement situations and their challenges. And we're also looking at how investing for income can oftentimes meet those challenges. So far, we've shared some examples of these situations, and now we're going to focus on one that isn't so unique today. And that's long-term couples that never tie the knot, known legally over the last few years as domestic partnerships. Roughly half the U.S. adult population is unmarried. Among that group, many live together as, yes, domestic partners. Now, this was originally formed to provide benefits to gay and lesbian couples before same-sex marriage was legal. But domestic partners also apply to heterosexual couples who live together. And the financial differences between a marriage and a domestic partnership are countless. Each has its own challenges when it comes to retirement planning. But on balance, I would say that married couples enjoy many benefits that domestic partners don't. For example, married couples have access to a spousal IRA. When one passes away, they can roll the IRA over to the others after death. They may also be able to transfer an unlimited amount of assets to one another without any gift or estate taxes. Also, if they're legally married, you might be better protected financially in the event of divorce. Additionally, if you're married and your spouse dies without a will, you're also better off because domestic partners may not be eligible for death, pension, or survivor benefits. Now, the absence of many of these benefits can obviously create special challenges for domestic partners when it comes to financial planning. And perhaps the biggest challenge is the fact that rules and laws around these partnerships vary greatly from state to state and often from city to city. And that means that it's essential to find the right advisor to help you understand the challenges and opportunities that affect you and to affect your loved one. Now it's time to get another one of your questions. So Anne from New York asks, what are bond ratings based on and how reliable are they? Well, Anne, that's a great question. And of course, it has absolutely nothing to do with unique situations, the topic of our show, but it's an important question, so I want to answer it for you. Bond ratings basically help determine the financial stability of an issuer of the bond. So just like you have a FICO score, a bank is going to look at your FICO score and determine your own creditworthiness before they make a loan. And income specialists will often use these bond rating agencies and the associated ratings to determine the creditworthiness of any bond they might be purchasing. But that's only a starting point. And we learned during the financial crisis in 2008, there's really limited usefulness to those ratings. And oftentimes, those ratings are very misleading. So a good income specialist looks beyond those ratings and looks at the actual creditworthiness of the company. So Anne, great question. We really appreciate you submitting it. And now it's time to bring back in Jeff Small.
So Dave, there's lots of unique situations that you and I see every day for our viewers and our listeners. And the majority of the time, we see tremendous benefits for people being married financially because people are stronger together than they are apart individually when it comes to their finances. And so to get that advantage, though, it doesn't really matter if you're married or not.
Yeah, that advantage doesn't really matter because even my clients that have lived together for a long time but aren't married, we have to treat their financial plan as one because they're living in the same household. There's a lot of married people that look at it as his money and her money and they don't want to commingle. And that's okay. So from that perspective, the planning is really not much different, right?
It's really not, but what ends up happening, though, if they're together for a long time, when they get into their 80s, there's a loss of benefits that will continue by way of a pension or potentially health care or even Social Security are impacted. But conversely, Dave, there are advantages to not being married in that scenario. If somebody needed long-term care as a perspective for expense, they're not going to have their assets eroded or unprotected. And so by not being married, you're protecting those assets and keeping them away from the sick person.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of people come in and say, well, we don't want to get married because if one person takes sick, goes to a convalescent facility, like you just mentioned, like we discussed before, I don't want my money drawn in. So at least if we're split 50-50 on assets, then at least some of the money will be protected, not necessarily go to the state in terms of Medicaid, right? And also if you decide to separate, well, then now there's not a messy divorce proceeding or all that. But then sometimes they get later in life and they say, gosh, I want to make sure that my spouse gets my Social Security benefit if I die. Or I want to make sure they can get tax-free receipt of the IRA if I die. So I've seen sometimes people get a terminal illness, maybe cancer, if you will, and say, okay, well, I'm probably not going to be in a convalescent facility, so now let's get married. so that we can get around these particular issues. And you know, Jeff, those that don't, one of the things they might do is if the real estate, the home they live in is in one person's name, they may actually turn around and say, you know what, let me set up a trust. Let me give my spouse with fewer assets lifetime use of the house. And then when I pass on, the house will go to my children because their mom, perhaps my widow, and myself all work together to financially to pay for that home. So my kids could get it, but I want my spouse to be able to use it. So again, some creative planning. There is no one size fits all. But the fun part of this is our next guest, Jeff, as you know, is really an expert at unique situations. And of course, that's David Stearns. He is the president of Stearns Retirement Group just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. He's also, of course, one of our very own retirement income store specialists. David, thanks so much for being back here with us on the Income Generation.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to be with you guys.
Hey, David, great to see you. Hey, listen, we're talking about unique situations today. And I know you probably have experienced some in your infinite wisdom up there, but tell us some of your unique situations you've experienced with your customers.
Well, you know, Jeff, recently I had someone that came to see me. They're now a client, but when they came to see me, I found it really unique because their former advisor had them over $2 million in one mutual fund. And not only that, but it was a tax-free muni fund, which is fine. There's many of them out there, but there was only one. And the type of yield that they were getting, they were pretty high up the risk curve within that fund. And so we had to uniquely begin to extricate them from that scenario. That was one of them. I've got another one, Jeff, where I had a lady maybe a year or so ago that had her first RMD to come out, you know, and with that first year, you get that exception. You can wait until the next calendar year, April 1. Well, she wanted to also liquidate a lot of non-qualified money to kind of realize her unrealized gains, right? And to make her portfolio more conservative, but she was going to have a rather large capital gain. So the unique situation there was, do we liquidate the non-qualified account, take the capital gains, and take the first RMD in that year, or do a tax analysis and look at if it would make more sense to wait on the first RMD to the next year, forcing her to take two in the next year? Unique situation. We got a CPA involved, and we successfully landed that plane for her.
Yeah. Well, Dave, unfortunately, the answer might be yes, go ahead and do it because tax rates are going to be going up. And part of the reason tax rates might be going up is because your state screwed up that senatorial runoff race. What are you doing? Are you going to move because of that now? Come on.
Hey, I tell you what, we still got a lot of people moving into our state, Dave, and we try to remind them from where they came from. This is not exactly blue, all the way blue here just yet.
That's right. That's right. There's still hope for you, as it is for myself and Jeff here in Florida. So, hey, we don't have a lot of time left, but, you know, real quick, we're going to be talking about special needs trusts. You know, for people, tell us the importance of that real quick as you help me tease up our next segment.
Well, you know, Dave, there's a lot of unique situations that come up in retirement planning. One of the things that we see sometimes is that there are adult children that are still very dependent upon our clients because of some of their own special needs. And so we very early on recognize that as fiduciaries, and we get some really good elder law attorneys to get involved with us to help navigate those waters so that we can make sure that the child with the special needs are cared for well beyond our client's lifetime.
Yeah, they need a little bit extra care. Absolutely. Dave, thanks so much for being back with us here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And coming up after the break, we're going to talk about that very exact unique retirement situation that affects a lot of Americans, and that's having special needs children. We're also going to be talking to income specialist Jerry Slusiewicz from California, and you're definitely not going to want to miss what he has to say. I'm David Scranton. I'm with Jeff Small. We're the Income Generation, and we'll be right back.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and of course, it's great to have you here as we talk about uniquely challenging retirement situations. and frankly, how in many cases, investing for income can help. So far, we've shared some examples and we've talked about some of the challenges of living together without being legally married. And in a moment, we'll focus on planning when a special needs child is involved. In most cases, financially providing for your children ends when they're in their 20s, right? At least we all hope so. But if you have a special needs child, then your financial support may never end. There's also a good chance your child will be living with you well into retirement, and most likely, this will have a major impact on your retirement goals, as well as the amount of income you need to help achieve them. So if you previously thought you needed $70,000 a year, you might now need $90,000 instead. If you choose for your child to live separately in a private-run group home, for example, then the costs could be even higher. They could run as much as $4,000 a month or more, depending upon the facility and the level of care required. Now, another huge issue is Social Security, because choosing just the right strategy for taking your benefits is always important and challenging, but it's even more challenging when you have a special needs child. Consider that if your child's disability began before age 22, then he or she may be eligible for Social Security disability benefits. Now, that amount is generally half of your monthly payment, but when you die, it increases to 3/4 of your payment. And this can be a big deal when it comes to calculating your income needs during retirement and your child's needs after you're gone. With multiple life expectancies, with healthcare factors, and with lots of other issues to consider, your already complex Social Security decision just got even more complicated. But now let's get to another one of your questions. Elliot from Maine says, you think the stock market could see another incident like the GameStop rally we saw a few months ago, or was that a fluke? Well, Elliot, yes, of course. There's always the ability for that to happen. I'm sure it will happen at some point, but understand that it can only happen with stocks that are thinly traded. In other words, stocks that where they're on a bunch of shares that trade hands on a daily basis. If you look at some of the bigger companies that are out there, where a lot of shares trade hands, there's a higher, as we call it, trading volume, to use a complex word that Jeff might use, for example, right? Then, really, I don't care about Reddit. I don't care about anything. Those stocks aren't going to be able to be manipulated nearly to that extent. So, Elliot, great question. And you too could submit your own question to Ask Dave at theretirementincomestore.com. So, Jeff, it's funny. I don't want to sound like investing for income is the answer to cancer, right? But truly, when it comes to having a special needs child, it's a big part of the picture, is it not?
Well, it definitely is, Dave. But if you've got a special needs child or somebody in your family that's got a disability, you have a tendency to hyper focus on making sure they're going to be provided for financially, throughout their lives post yours. And so, depending upon their situation, you're going to need a lot of money. So you're going to constantly focus on that, and maybe sometimes avoid your retirement planning or some other areas of your life because you're hyper focused on them.
Right. And as we said a moment ago, you'll actually need more income in retirement because of the situation. And as a result, it's kind of like they say in an airplane, right? If there's rapid decompression, put your own mask on before you put the mask on the child, right, Jeff? And so you got to have to do the same thing with your own planning. If you put the mask on the child first, you may pass out before it gets there. And that could very well happen. So if you get the special needs trust done, everything else you need, but you don't have enough to even support yourselves, now you're really doing, in the big picture, a disservice to your child that really is depending upon you.
Well, true, Dave, but special needs trust is a receptacle for assets that you've accumulated that are going to be passed into that environment of a trust for your disabled child once you pass away. So you're not giving up ownership of them out of the gate. And so generally the special needs trust is done to avoid the loss of benefits that child might be getting because of the inheritance or having too much income, let's say.
And it's a fine line because some people emotionally, Jeff, as you know, want to put more money in the special needs trust because they figure, well, my son is healthy and he can work and make a lot of money. My daughter can't. So I want to put 2/3 the assets there for her and 1/3 for my son. And that may be, I get an altruistic thing, but at the end of the day, the reasons for which they can legally take money out of that special needs trust often are very narrow, and as a result, that money often never gets used. So I know you like to say that, a lot of things in the income world are like Goldilocks, right? They've got to be not too hot, not too cold, just right. Well, the same is true when you're figuring out how much money to put in that special needs trust. It can't be too much or too little, and that's one of the toughest decisions sometimes that people have to make, and consulting with an income specialist really helps make that decision easier. In fact, Jeff, consulting with an income specialist like our next guest from the left coast, Jerry Slusiewicz. Jerry is founder of Pacific Financial Planners located in Laguna Niguel, California. And he has over 30 years of experience working with these types of issues. And he's hosted his own radio show for the last 15 years, Your Money Talks. Jerry, great to have you back here on the Income Generation.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
So Jerry, you're very unique in your own way because you're an income specialist, but tell us about some of the unique situations you've seen with your customers.
Well, Jeff, income is a relative statement because some people need a lot of income and some people need less. I had a doctor not too long ago from Newport Beach, a highly affluent area out here in Southern California, come to see me. And when we did our analysis after everything, this guy needed around $11,000 from his portfolio per month, and he had about 1.5 million. And that's a high bar to cross. You're talking, well over, $130,000 a year off of, a portfolio that's almost 10%. So he had this lifestyle all along, fairly extravagant because of his income, and he was taking care of his kids who were adults, but now. And when you factor that against other folks who've gotten together a little bit more conservative, paid down their house, they've had kids that they kind of weaned off the family money for a little while, and they could use maybe $500,000 and achieve a better lifestyle than someone who had such an extravagant lifestyle. So your income needs will vary depending on the situation dramatically.
So he was unique in the sense that he had a much larger amount of money that he wanted to withdraw than was really possible. So you had to bring him back down to earth, it sounds like.
Well, again, it's really tough to try to kick off those high rates of return and still have money left to last. This gentleman was only 63 years old. And when you start doing the math and you start looking at inflation, he wasn't really, it was going to be tough for him to make it if he gave up his job. He wanted to retire. Another couple comes in and says, I don't think we can retire. We only have about 500,000. But because of their lifestyle, it was a much better, easier situation to achieve. I said, yeah, you guys can retire and you'll be just fine. So it's always an individual measurement of income, so to speak, depending on their unique situation.
And Jerry, it's funny because you talk about lifestyle. You guys over there on the left coast have had a lifestyle where you've been kind of closed down now for well over a year. You're opening up again. So does that optimism about opening up, does that translate to the financial markets from what you're hearing when you talk to folks?
Well, it does in the fact that we're sick and tired. People are sick and tired of being shut in and closed down. I mean, all the articles out here from the local press always compare us to you guys down in Florida. And it's never a good comparison because you guys have done so well relative to us with the shutdown. That's really good. But I'll tell you what scares people is you guys recently had the gas problem. I don't know if that affected you guys down in South Florida, but with the pipeline getting shut down. And the talk is out here with our gas prices at around $4.15, $1 over the national average. And we actually manufacture the gasoline really close by here. I think that the inflation is tempering the opening up. So we're optimistic that we finally get outside and do things, but there's fear of the future.
Yeah, well, fear of inflation. Well, the good news is I don't think anybody's predicting a 1970s inflation style again, but we could see inflation for the next couple of years higher than we've seen it recently. So Jerry, thanks so much for being back with us here on the Income Generation.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
And coming up, we'll talk more about how investing for income can help create the right retirement strategy regardless of your situation. And helping us will be income specialist Michael Eastham. So you're going to want to stick around for this final segment of the show. I'm David Scranton, and this is the Income Generation. We'll be right back. I'm David Scranton. When it came time for my mom to retire, one simple mistake forced her to work years longer than she should have. And that's why I started the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans 55 and over plan for the retirement they deserve. I couldn't help my mom, but maybe I can help you.
If you're 55 or older, please claim our free Retirement Income Kit. Chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-314-7227. Online at theretirementincomestore.com.
Welcome back to The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. Thanks for tuning in. You know, we've been talking about unique retirement situations throughout this show, as well as the challenges that they create. And we've looked closely at folks that live together without tying the knot, as well as retiring if you have a special needs child. But now we'll talk more about how investing for income actually gives you a strategy designed to address many of these unique challenges. So regardless of your situation, oftentimes the best place to start retirement planning is with goal setting, right? Because once you've identified your specific retirement goals, then and only then are you able to craft a strategy designed to help achieve them. You'll also have a much clearer picture of the potential challenges that you're going to face. And for domestic partners, some of those challenges may stem from your lack of access to the same financial benefits that married couples enjoy. And now, if you have a special needs child alternatively, then your challenges can relate to how your child's ongoing care will affect your retirement goals, as well as your income needs. You know, there are two main reasons for why investing for retirement income makes sense in these situations, as well as, quite frankly, most situations. And the first becomes clear as soon as you set your goals. And it's because 9 times out of 10, you realize that they are income-based goals. In other words, you actually recognize they're goals that you want to pay for with income, not by selling shares of stocks or mutual funds or drawing off a savings account. You want to fund them with a reliable income stream from hopefully a secure source of principal, one that can keep pace with inflation and lets you enjoy retirement with greater peace of mind, which is exactly what the income model is designed to do. Now, the other reason is that advisors who specialize in income are oftentimes better qualified to help you prepare for these unique challenges and situations. And not just 10 years into the future, but 30 years or more. Why? Because investing for income is a true strategy, and it prepares you for every possible contingency as part of that strategy. Now it's time to take one more question. Amy from Iowa says, what's the best investment choice for the money you want to leave as an inheritance? Amy, thanks so much for that question, particularly because it actually fits in with the topic of the show. And it's simple. If you want to leave money as an inheritance and you need income, well, then you need to invest for income. If you don't need income from that and you just want to leave it as inheritance, then depending upon your age, depending upon your risk tolerance level, that's a situation where you might want to stay growth-oriented with your investments philosophically for longer. But again, you got to be pretty sure that you're not going to need the income from those investments now or in the future, and you have the risk tolerance to be able to deal with the ups as well as the downs. So Amy, great question, thank you. And as you know, you could submit your own questions to askdave@theretirementincomestore.com. So Jeff, great question by Amy, right? Because it's not always about income, right? Sometimes people just want to leave a big legacy and maybe they've got a huge pension and don't need it, right? So there's different situations.
Yeah, there's so many unique situations out there, Dave. And, I think Jerry said it best when he said everybody's situation is very unique. And so you want to work with somebody who's going to help assist you with whatever your uniqueness is and what it is you want to accomplish. But creating income is a natural transition at this stage of the market cycle. The markets are very high. There's not going to be very much forward growth because we've hit this epic level going forward. So getting an interest off of your money is going to be a better proxy for stability and consistency than the markets will going forward.
Of course, like in Amy's case, she may not care about that. She may just want to leave a legacy. So that's where I always talk about everyone wants maximum return with minimum risk on their investments, right? Ideal world, that's what we all want, right? The impossible. But as you know, we have to ask maximum return for what purpose? Is it for regular expenses during retirement that we want to satisfy out of income? Or like Amy, is it more just to leave a big legacy? We don't need income today? Or is it maybe like Jeff, to cash some money out and maybe to buy a bigger boat when you get into retirement, right? So it really depends what that eventual use will be of the money.
Well, you're exactly right, Dave. But the legacy thing is a big deal, but making sure the assets have some forward progression is really important because you want your assets to expand to keep up with inflation. And there's a number of different ways to do that. But you as a unique individual, as an investor, as a unique investor, as a listener or a viewer, has got to take responsibility of that. It's your job to make sure that you get that.
Yeah. No matter how much you care about your clients, I care about my clients. Nobody cares more about your money than you do, and that's the bottom line. So, when I think about it, it's what we're talking about is ultimately having the right strategy is more important than the right specific investments. And a lot of your Ask Dave questions are coming in about particular investments. But, again, we talk about strategy. How do you want to create that inflation hedge, right, that Jeff was just talking about? Do you have the risk tolerance to be in higher dividend stocks so you get a little appreciation along the way, maybe some real estate investment trusts? Or are you conservative, you're only going to do bonds and bond-like instruments, in which case you may have to just not take all your income, reinvest some of the income, and get your inflation hedge that way. Right, Jeff?
There's no doubt about that. Investing for income is a great way, but the markets were a great hedge for inflation at some point, but that was a long time ago. It's not present at this stage. So you want to make sure that you are spending less than you're taking in, but also reinvesting some of those funds so you can build up that inflation hedge even further.
Yeah, and whether you're investing for income in the stock market or in the universe of bonds and bond-like instruments, I know, Jeff, you'll second this. The most important thing is don't wait too long. Start about 10 years before you retire. Start making that transition from growth to income. And it's gradual. It doesn't have to be just like a light switch. It can be a rheostat. And Jeff, as you know, one of our favorite guests here on The Income Generation is our next guest, and that's Michael Eastham, founder of Fellowship Financial Group, a retirement income store located right near Orlando, Florida. Now, Michael is also the Amazon best-selling author of the book, Common Sense Income Strategies, a true income specialist. Michael, thanks so much for being here with us on the show.
It's always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, we're talking a lot about different situations that are unique today. But you offer very unique ideas and strategies for your customers. And so tell us about those unique ideas and strategies.
Well, Jeff, one of the things that I'll just kind of give you an example. I mean, just recently we had a situation where a lady came in and her husband had recently passed away. It was unexpected. And he was always the one, not only the primary breadwinner in the household, but also the one that managed the assets and did a pretty decent job. The problem was he didn't send that information, he didn't share a whole lot of that information with her. And so when he passed away suddenly, she wasn't aware of the change that needed to be made to Social Security for her to take that on. But once she got his Social Security in place, she realized she had a big gap in income in order to make all of her expenses. So in that particular situation, we were able to devise a strategy that helped her to fill the gap through dividends and interest and predictable income streams that gave her the confidence that she was going to be able to live comfortably and accomplish the goals that she had. So that's one of the beauties of having an income strategy or specializing in income so that people, that is the one thing that they need. It's income for a purpose. It's making sure that you have enough income to last 20, 30 years in retirement.
Sure. The uniqueness of retirement is you can't retire unless you have income. So that's not unique. But the problem with our industry is they don't focus on that. Right, Mike?
That's right. I mean, the same mantras that were true back in the 70s and 80s, they try to pull all of those things forward to retirement and just focusing on it. Hey, wow, well, 4% rule, I could use that and just take 4% of my assets every single year. Well, that works fine as long as the market's going up. But when it goes down, you are depleting your principal way too soon. And that could cause you to run out of money before you run out of life. So there has to be a strategy shift for at least a portion of money that you need in order to have that predictable income.
So Michael, really quick, it's funny, People were resistant to the income message before COVID because the market had gone up for a whole bunch of years. So now it had a major drop, but then with the unprecedented things that Congress and the Fed did, it recovered quickly. So net, does the drop make people more tenderized, if you will, to understand why they need income? Or is the quick recovery maybe a negative and they think, well, who cares? The market only goes up.
No, I think people are changing their minds, especially the folks that are much closer to retirement. They're realizing that if the market drops and I'm retired, I can't get my salary back. So something has to change.
Michael, great big thanks for being back with us here on The Income Generation. And also, Jeff, as usual, a big thank you to you because we've had a great time today. Here's the bottom line, though. If we're close to or you're in retirement and you're concerned about your money, as you know, it's essential you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.